The encounter asterisk. It was a quiet night in New Haven City. The sky was full of flying cars, moving like fireflies in the dark. The tall buildings stood like giants, watching over the sleeping world. Streetlights blinked slowly, and the air felt heavy. Jay was walking home from his long shift at the tech store. He was tired and bored, his bag was heavy, and his thoughts were slow. He just wanted to eat something, and sleep. As he passed through a narrow street, something strange happened. A bright light flashed across the sky like a falling star, but it was too fast, too low, and too loud. It shook the ground like a small earthquake. Jaden looked up quickly. The light crashed behind the old factory near the river. There was smoke, there was silence. And then came a soft humming sound, like a broken machine trying to breathe. Jaden hesitated for a second, but curiosity pulled him forward. He ran toward the factory, his heart beating faster as he reached the crash site. He stopped, his eyes wide. There was a small spaceship. It was real, not a dream, not a movie. The ship was silver and smooth like liquid metal. Parts of it were broken, and sparks flew out from one side. Jaden stepped closer. His hands were shaking. The ship opened slowly. Steam came out from the door. A figure appeared. She was tall. Her skin was glowing slightly like moonlight on water. She had long silver hair and eyes that looked like stars. She wore something like armor, but it also looked like a designer suit. She looked more like a model than a soldier, but she was hurt. She stumbled forward, and Jaden rushed to catch her. She fell into his arms. He looked at her face. It was not human, but it was beautiful. Her lips moved slowly, and she tried to speak. Her voice was soft but clear. She said, "I need your help." Only you. Jaden stared at her, confused. He had never seen an alien before, only in news or on screens. Now one was here in his arms. She was real, and she was looking at him like she knew him. He said, "Are you okay? What happened? Who are you?" She smiled faintly. Her eyes were tired. She touched his chest gently with her glowing hand. She whispered, "You got me pregnant." Human. Jaden froze. His mind stopped working. What did she just say? Pregnant him? How they never met? Before she was an alien. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. She fainted in his arms. He looked around. No one was there. No one saw the ship. No one saw her. Just him. Jaden picked her up carefully. She was light, almost too light-like. She was not made of the same stuff as humans. He carried her to his apartment, just a few blocks away. His hands were cold, his head full of questions. Who was she? Why him? What did she mean pregnant? Was it a mistake? Was it real? Was he in danger? He looked back one last time at the factory. The ship was still there, still smoking, still glowing. He had no answers, only questions. And one very strange guest asked. The door of his apartment closed behind him. The city outside continued to sleep, but Jaden knew. His life had just changed forever. Inside his room, he placed her gently on the couch. He sat on the floor staring at her. She looked peaceful now, but also mysterious. He whispered to himself, what just happened? Then her eyes opened again, just for a second. She looked at him and smiled. Again this time she said, "They are coming. Protect the child." Then her eyes closed. Once more Jaden sat there frozen. 100 thoughts spinning in his head. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing: this was just the beginning. The night grew darker, and the silence in Jaden's apartment felt heavy, like a thick blanket made of fear and confusion. Zyra lay still on the couch, her body glowing faintly, like stars hiding behind clouds. Jaden sat on the floor beside her, knees pulled to his chest, staring without blinking, afraid to speak, afraid to move. Her last words echoed in his mind like thunder rolling slowly across a dead valley. "They are coming. Protect the child," he whispered to himself. Again and again, trying to make sense of it. Protect what child? What did she mean? How is this even possible? What did he do? He never touched her. He never even met her before tonight's. Suddenly, Zyra moved. Her eyes opened. Slowly this time her gaze was calm but sharp like a blade. Wrapped in silk, she looked at Jaden like she knew everything about him, like she had seen his past, his fears, his dreams. She sat up slowly, her movements graceful yet heavy with pain. She held her side as if something inside was hurting more than the crash. Jaden stood up quickly, his voice shaky but honest. "Are you okay? You said I got you pregnant. What does that mean? I don't even know you." Zyra's expression softened, as if she expected this confusion. She nodded slowly and looked around the room like she was measuring every shadow, every wall, every light. Then she spoke, her voice clear and steady like the sound of water in a cavity. "I'm Zyra, from the House of Vela. My people are from a star system, humans. Call Sector 14. We are not like your kind. We do not need touch to create life. We carry genetic receptors that respond to unique signals. Your body, your DNA, triggered the seed inside me. It was unexpected. It should not have happened, but it did." Jaden blinked, trying to follow each word, like he was reading a strange language for the first time. He stepped back, his hands shaking. He asked, "Why him? Why not someone else?" Zyra stood up with effort, her tall figure now filling the room with something he could not describe, not just presence, but weight like destiny had taken form. She walked to the window and looked outside into the sleeping city, her eyes scanning the skies. She said his signal was pure, rare, untainted by war or artificial change, that his soul matched a prophecy her people feared, and that the child inside her was the first of its kind. Jaden could not believe what he was hearing. A prophecy, a rare signal, a hybrid child. He was just a guy who sold tech gadgets. He had no power, no secret, no plan. He was just human. But Zyra turned and said that was exactly why the child was important. Because humans still held something her people lost long ago, hope before he could speak again. The lights flickered, and the room turned cold. Zyra's eyes turned sharp and bright. They have found us, she said. They are here, we must leave now. Jaden grabbed his jacket and asked where they could go. Zyra touched a device on her wrist, and a small hologram appeared, showing a hidden ship outside the city, under the old bridge. She said they had to reach it before the hunters closed in. They rushed out of the building into the cold night. Jaden's mind raced with questions, but his feet kept moving. Zyra stayed close, guiding him through alleys and rooftops like a ghost who knew every corner of the world. Behind them shadows moved. Strange figures with black suits and glowing helmets followed without sound. Zyra said they were called the Silence, trained to capture hybrid life at any cost. They did not speak, they did not feel, they only hunted. As they reached the edge of the city, Jaden looked at Zyra. She looked tired, but her eyes still burned with purpose. He asked her why she trusted him, why she risked everything to come here. She looked at him and said, because I saw your future before I saw your face. And in that future, you held the child with love, not fear. They reached the hidden entrance near the bridge. The door opened with a soft hum, and bright blue lights stepped inside, and Jaden followed without thinking. Just before the door closed, Jaden looked back. He saw the shadows reaching the street behind them. He felt the fear chasing them like a storm without mercy inside the hidden base. Zyra collapsed. Again, her hands on her stomach, her face pale and glowing. Jaden ran to her side. He asked if she was okay. Yara looked at him, breathing hard. She whispered that the child was growing faster than expected, and it was calling to something far beyond this world. Jaden held her hand, not knowing what to do, but knowing he had to stay outside. The hunters searched every street. But inside the shadows, a new life was beginning. The cold air inside the hidden base was thick with silence and tension, as if the walls themselves were listening to every breath, every movement, every heartbeat. Zyra lay on a soft, glowing bed made from alien fabric that changed shape with her body. Her eyes were closed, her hands over her stomach, and her lips moving with words Jaden could not understand. He stood beside her, watching her face, watching the rise and fall of her chest, trying to make sense of what was happening. This was not a normal night. This was not a normal life. He was supposed to be working at a store, eating cheap noodles, watching old shows, sleeping late. But now he was standing in a secret alien base, watching a glowing alien woman speak to something growing inside her. Jaden looked around the room. It was filled with strange machines, glowing tubes, soft lights blinking slowly, as if breathing. One wall showed a map of Earth, and blinking red lights around New Haven City. Each red light meant danger, meant someone was getting closer. The hunters. Suddenly the lights turned blue, and a door opened without sound. A tall figure entered, covered in armor made of crystal and steel. The figure removed its helmet, and revealed a face that looked human, but with golden eyes and silver veins glowing under the skin. The stranger spoke in a voice that was deep but kind. He said his name was Kale, and he was Zyra's protector before she left the homeworld. He had tracked her here after she vanished from the royal system. He looked at Jaden and asked why a human was involved in something sacred and dangerous. Jaden stepped forward, trying not to show fear, trying not to look weak. He said he never asked for this, he never wanted this. He said he was just trying to help her because no one else would. Kyle listened in silence, then nodded slowly. He said the hunters were not far, and that they had already surrounded parts of the city. He said the hybrid child was more valuable than anything in the galaxy, and both governments and rebels would kill to get it. Zyra opened her eyes and called Kale by name. She smiled weakly, and told him that the child had chosen its father, that the child had responded to Jaden before anyone else. Kale looked at her with surprise, then looked again at Jaden. Jaden felt something shift in the room, something invisible but strong, as if the base itself now accepted him as part of the mission, part of the purpose. Kale moved quickly and activated a hidden console. On the wall, a small flying drone appeared from the ceiling and scanned Jaden's body from head to toe. It beeped once, and a symbol appeared above his head. The symbol glowed with two colors, one from Zyra and one unknown. Kale looked at the symbol, then spoke with urgency. He said the child's energy was sinking with Jaden faster than expected. He said they had no more time. They had to move. Zyra stood slowly, her hand still on her stomach, her face glowing brighter. She said the child was pulling them towards something across the stars, but they had to escape Earth first. Jaden asked how they would do that when the hunters were everywhere. Kale smiled and revealed a hidden panel behind the console. A small orb floated out and expanded into a hologram of a starship hidden under the ocean, near the coastal defense line. He said it was the only ship fast enough to escape the solar system, and cloaked enough to avoid detection. Jaden asked how they would reach it with the hunters. Closing in, Kale said they had help from someone who still believed in the old prophecy. A name whispered in shadows, an ally hidden in human form outside. The base engines roared. The hunters were here. Kale handed Jaden a wristband and told him to never remove it, he said. The band was linked to the child's heartbeat and would protect him as long as he stayed close. Zyra moved toward the exit, her body shining like starlight. Jaden followed as alarms began to echo. Through the base doors opened into darkness, tunnels lit up with blue lights showing the path they ran through the underground system built long ago by aliens who once lived among humans. Behind them, explosions shook the walls. The silence were inside. Kale fought them off with weapons made of light and gravity. Jaden and Zyra kept running, their footsteps echoing like drumbeats of a coming war. Finally, they reached the surface. A sleek vehicle shaped like a silver arrow waited for them. The door opened and they jumped inside. Zyra looked at Jaden, her eyes full of both pain and power. She said this was not just about survival, this was about the future of two worlds. The vehicle launched into the sky, disappearing into the night. Below, the city lights flickered above the stars. Waited, the sky turned orange as the morning light touched the edge of the world, and the silver vehicle moved like a shadow across the silent clouds, leaving no sound, no trail, no clue inside the cockpit. Jaden sat with his eyes on the screen, trying to understand the strange symbols glowing in front of him. Beside him, Zyra was resting, her head tilted back, her hands over her stomach, her face calm but her breath slow and careful. Kale sat behind them, scanning the radar, watching every moving blip, every signal, every possible threat that could appear from the sky below or the stars above. Jaden asked how long until they reached the ocean. Kale answered with one word: soon. But soon was never soon enough. When danger chased every second, like a beast with no eyes and no name, Zyra opened her eyes and looked at Jaden, her voice soft like wind through trees. She asked if he trusted her. Jaden nodded without thinking, but his heart felt heavy like a locked door with no key. She asked if he knew someone on Earth who could help, someone with knowledge of alien energy, someone who worked with machines but believed in the stars. Jaden thought for a moment, then his face lit up with the name Leo. He told them about Leo, a young engineer who once worked on secret government projects and now lived near the coast in a small solar cabin off the main grid. Leo had always believed in life beyond Earth, and once told Jaden that one day the stars would come looking for him. Jaden thought he was joking, but now that memory felt like a message from the future. Kale hesitated, but agreed. They needed supplies, repairs, and someone who could decode the child's energy spike that kept growing every hour. The ship turned sharply and vanished behind the clouds, moving lower toward the forest. Trees passed like green waves, and soon the silver cabin appeared near the hill, alone and silent, surrounded by solar towers. And Anthony. Jaden stepped out first, calling Leo's name with hope in his voice and fear in his chest. The door opened and Leo appeared, wearing metal gloves and a smile that faded when he saw Zyra glowing like a star in human shape. Jaden told him everything in fast, broken words, while Zyra stood in silence and Kale watched with eyes sharp as blades. Leo listened, then nodded slowly, and invited them inside. The cabin was small, but full of machines, lights, and tools. Screens blinked with strange codes and maps of stars Jaden had never seen. Leo said he always knew something was coming, something big, something impossible. He asked Zyra to sit on a chair surrounded by scanners, and gently placed small sensors on her arms and neck. He asked no questions, only worked with hands steady and fast, like someone waiting for this moment. All his life Kale kept looking outside, watching the skies and the trees and the wind itself. Jaden stood beside Zyra, holding her hand, feeling the pulse of something alive, something ancient, moving between them. After 1 hour, Leo turned to them, his face pale, his eyes wide. He said the child's energy was not stable. It was growing faster than anything he had seen. It was not just feeding on Zyra's body, it was feeding on signals from space, as if calling something back. Kale stepped forward and demanded answers. Leo looked away, then reached into his pocket and pressed a small button. Everything changed. The windows darkened, the screens turned red, doors locked with a loud click that echoed like thunder. Kale shouted and pulled his weapon, but it was too late. A beam hit him from the wall, and he fell unconscious. Zyra stood up quickly, her glow turning sharp and her body ready for battle, but Leo held up a small crystal and spoke in a strange tongue. Zira froze, her body locked in place by energy older than language itself. Jaden shouted, asking what Leo was doing. Leo looked at him with sad eyes and said he was sorry. He said a message came weeks ago from a group beyond the stars, offering him power and knowledge if he delivered the hybrid child. He said he never wanted to hurt anyone, but the child was worth more than planets. Jaden moved slowly toward Zyra, who stood frozen, her eyes still alive, but her body still a stone. Leo warned him to stop. Jaden kept walking. He said he would not let this happen. Not again. He grabbed the crystal from Leo's hand and smashed it on the floor. The spell broke. Zyra gasped, and light exploded from her skin, sending Leo flying across the room. Kale opened his eyes and rolled to his feet, ready to fight, but Leo did not move. Zyra placed a hand on her stomach and whispered to the child. Then she looked at Jaden with fire in her eyes. She said betrayal was always expected, but never forgiven. Kale walked to the control panel and opened the secret path to the ocean. They had to leave now, before more enemies arrived. Jaden looked back at Leo, who now sat in silence, his dreams broken and his heart empty. Then he followed Zyra and Kale into the silver ship outside. The trees moved, like whispers in the wind above the sky, waited for the next chapter to begin. The ocean roared beneath the hidden launch platform, as the silver ship hummed with silent power, waiting for the stars to open their arms. Zyra stood near the cockpit, her hands resting gently over her stomach, her face calm, but her eyes glowing brighter than before. Jaden sat beside her, watching the rising platform take them above the waves. The sky above them turning from gray to black, as clouds faded and stars appeared like ancient fires in the cold. Kale moved quickly through the ship, checking every system, scanning for threats, rerouting power to shields and engines. He knew they had little time. The betrayal at the cabin had triggered something bigger than any of them could imagine. Across the sky, satellites blinked awake, tracking their movements, sending signals to ships, not from Earth. The hunters were not far. But now they were not alone. As the ship broke through the last layer of the atmosphere, everything changed. The silence of space welcomed them with open arms. Weight disappeared, gravity surrendered, time stretched. Jaden stared out of the window, his breath caught between awe and fear. Earth looked so small now. Just a blue marble floating in a black sea. He whispered to himself, asking how this became his life. How a normal man became part of something written in the stars. Zyra looked at him and smiled, her hand reaching for his fingers gently. She said some paths are chosen long before a soul is born, that the child inside her was never meant to be ordered. Called him to the command deck, his voice sharp but calm. He pointed to a distant signal, moving fast through the starfield. It was not human, not friendly, not slow. He said the ship following them was built by a faction known as the Order of Purity, a group that believed hybrids were a curse, not a miracle. Jaden asked how they found them. Kale replied that the child was no longer hiding. It was sending signals of its own. Zyra sat on the floor of the chamber near the core, closing her eyes and placing both hands on her stomach. She began to chant in her native tongue, her voice echoing like a song made of light and fire. The walls of the ship glowed in response. The child was listening. Suddenly the ship shook, an energy pulse hit their shields. The hunter ship had arrived. Cal jumped into the pilot's seat and pulled the ship into a sharp turn, engines screaming without sound. Jaden held onto the railing, his heart pounding like thunder trapped in his chest. Lasers flashed across space, missing them by inches. Kale returned fire with plasma bursts that lit the dark with color and heat. Jaden watched the screen as enemy drones closed. Zyra did not move. She kept chanting. The child kept glowing. The ship's power began to rise on its own. Kale noticed the controls reacting before he touched them. Jaden looked at Zyra. She was no longer just glowing. She was transformed. In her body shimmered like liquid stars. Her voice merged with another, a voice from within her. The child was awake without warning. The ship surged forward faster than any technology should allow. Stars turned into lines. Time folded. They passed through a field of ancient ruins, floating in space, forgotten by time, untouched by light. Kale said nothing, just stared in silence, knowing they had entered a path not mapped by any chart. Then the ship stopped, calm, still silent. In front of them a giant gate stood tall, made of crystal and energy, its center spinning slowly like the eye of the universe. Zyra opened her eyes and said this was the place, this was the path, only the hybrid could unlock. Jaden asked what was on the other side. Zyra looked at him and said truth. Not just answers, truth. Kale warned them that once they entered, there was no going back, no signal, no call, no return. Jaden looked at Zyra, then looked at her stomach, then looked at the stars. He said they came this far. They would go all the ways. Zyra stood and placed her hand on the control. The gate responded. It opened like a flower blooming in poured in, not white, not blue, not gold, a light that carried sound and memory, and feeling the ship entered inside the gate. Time slowed. Visions danced before their eyes, cities made of air, creatures of light, songs of planets, unborn Zira, began to cry. Not from pain, but from knowing Jaden saw a version of himself holding the child on a green world filled with laughter. Kale saw the end of the war. A galaxy in peace, a throne without blood. Then the ship exited the gate. They were no longer in there. Galaxy stars were new, space was unfamiliar, but everything felt right. Zira turned to Jaden and whispered, "We are not running anymore, we are arriving." And, somewhere in the stars, the child moved for the first time, and smiled without speaking. The new galaxy stretched before them like an endless ocean filled with stars that pulsed like beating hearts, each one whispering secrets of a place. Untouched by war, untouched by fear, untouched by history. Jaden stood at the edge of the observation deck. His eyes wide as the sky filled with colors. He had no name for the ship, floated quietly through this space like it belonged here. Like it had always been meant to find this place. Zira sat in a chamber made of soft light and crystal walls, her body surrounded by warmth, her skin glowing brighter with each breath. The child inside her was growing faster than any logic could explain, but nothing felt wrong, nothing felt dangerous. She was calm, her heart steady, her mind open. Kale walked through the silent halls, checking systems, checking weapons, checking the space beyond the window, but everything was still, everything was waiting. He knew this silence was not the kind of silence before danger. This was the silence before something sacred inside the chamber. Zira closed her eyes and began to hum a melody from her homeworld. It was a song mothers once sang 2 stars before planting life on empty moons. It was a promise of safety, a promise of hope. Jaden entered slowly, his steps careful, his eyes focused on Zira. He sat beside her and took her hand into his, as warmth flowed between them like water finding its path through stone. He asked if she was scared. She shook her head and smiled. She said she had seen this in dreams long before she ever met him. She said, "The child chose him not because of blood, not because of destiny, but because of love." Jaden looked at her stomach, then looked at her face, and for the first time, he felt not fear but something new, something ancient, something powerful. He felt like a father. Kale entered and said the readings were clear. The birth would happen soon. He handed Jaden a small crystal with ancient symbols carved into it. He said the crystal would guide the child's energy and protect the ship during the process. Zira breathed deeply, her glow shifting with the rhythm of the child within. The lights of the ship dimmed, as if the whole vessel was preparing itself like it knew what was about to begin. The birth began not with pain, but with light. Zira's body lifted slightly from the surface, her hair floating like smoke, her eyes closed, her lips moving with silent words. The chamber filled with waves of golden light, soft and warm like a sunrise that never ends. Jaden stood still, holding the crystal in one hand, and Zira's fingers in the other. Kale stood behind him, his armor shining like a mirror under a holy fire. Then the chamber went completely still. Light vanished for a moment, then returned brighter than before. The center of the room floated a small figure, wrapped in light, wrapped in warmth, wrapped in something that felt like joy. The child had arrived. Zira opened her eyes, tears falling not from pain but from wonder. Jaden stepped forward and reached out, and the child floated into his arms, as if drawn by something deeper than gravity. The child looked at him with eyes that held galaxies, eyes that had no fear, eyes that already knew. No crying, no confusion, just come. Jaden whispered hello, and the child responded not with voice but with thought. It said, "You are enough." Kale fell to one knee, not in weakness but in respect. He bowed his head and said the prophecy was never about power, it was about balance. Zira stood slowly, her body weak but her spirit strong. She placed her hand on Jaden's shoulder and looked at the child with love deeper than space. She said this child would not rule but guide, not conquer but unite, not destroy but create. Outside the ship, a pulse of light spread across the stars, touching satellites and dormant ships and long-lost signals. Worlds received it, hearts felt it. Something had changed back on Earth. A child woke from sleep and drew a star with wings. On Mars, a flower bloomed where no seed was planted. On a lost moon, a machine whispered the word peace for the first time in 1,000 years. Inside the ship, Jaden held the child and asked, "What now?" Zira said, "Now we listen, now we follow, now we heal." Kale looked at the map and saw paths opening where before there was nothing. The child was making roads through the stars. Jaden looked out the window and felt no fear, no doubt, no weight. He felt ready. The ship moved forward slowly, gently, with purpose, and in the arms of a human and an alien. Together the child closed its eyes and dreamed. The stars outside were quiet, like old watchers resting after a storm. Their glow soft and patient, their voices silent, but present. The ship moved slowly through a peaceful sector, where no wars had ever reached, and no rulers had ever claimed the light. Inside the chamber, the child slept within a cocoon of soft golden energy, floating gently above the floor, breathing in harmony with the ship itself. Jaden sat close by his hand, resting on the barrier, his eyes filled with wonder and calm. And something deeper than peace. Ira stood near the window, watching a new world slowly come into view. A planet covered in forests and oceans, glowing blue and green like Earth. Before time changed its soul, she turned to Jaden and asked if he ever thought this would be his life. He smiled and said, "Life never asked him before, it changed." Kale entered, carrying a crystal tablet glowing with messages from across the galaxy. He said the signal of the child had reached far systems and awakened old alliances and ancient enemies. Some called it a miracle, some called it a threat, but all of them listened to Jaden, looked at the child, and then at Kale, and asked what they wanted. Now Kale said they wanted truth and guidance, and a sign that this was not the beginning of another war. Zyra stepped forward, her voice strong and steady, and said this was not war, this was rebirth. They landed the ship on the surface of the green planet, soft clouds parting. As the landing platform opened, the air smelled fresh like rain on stone. The sky had two suns, both warm but gentle like twin hearts, beating in peace. They carried the child in a crystal cradle, surrounded by light, and stepped onto the soil where no footprint had been made. Before a council had arrived from different worlds, beings of many shapes and colors, all waiting in silence, as Jaden, Zyra, and Kale approached. No one spoke at first, only the wind moved. Then the child opened its eyes, and looked at the sky, and the council, and the stars, and smiled without sound. A single voice echoed across the field, not from the child, not from the council, not from any mouth, but from the air itself. It said, "Balance has arrived." The council bowed not in worship, but in acceptance. They asked no questions, because the answer was already clear. Jaden looked at Zyra, and said he did not feel like the same person who once walked home from work in the dark, with tired feet, and a bag of fast food. Zyra laughed softly, and said, "You got me pregnant, human." And then everything became new. They stayed on the planet for many cycles, building a sanctuary, where those seeking peace could arrive. Without fear, where species could meet, without history, where children could learn without hate. The child grew quickly, not just in body but in mind, speaking languages no one had taught, singing songs no one had written, drawing stars no one had seen. Jaden taught him how to laugh, Zyra taught him how to listen, Kale taught him how to stand tall without needing to raise a weapon. One evening, as the sky turned violet and stars began to rise, the child sat beside Jaden and asked what it meant to be human. Jaden said it meant to try, even when unsure, to care, even when afraid, to protect, even when small. The child smiled and said, "Then, I am human." 20 watched them from the doorway, her eyes soft, her heart full. She remembered her first breath on Earth, her first step into a world she was meant to fear, but found hope instead. She remembered the look on Jaden's face when she first said those strange, unbelievable words, "You got me pregnant, human." She walked outside and sat beside them, the three of them watching the stars. No throne, no army, no crown, only love. The wind moved through the trees, the sky blinked slowly, and somewhere deep in space, a warship turned away from battle and headed home. Kale stood guard, not because danger was near, but because peace deserved a shield. He looked at the family and said the galaxy would change, not through force, but through presence, through one child, through one human, through one choice. Jaden looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you," not to a god, not to a fate, but to the moment that brought Zyra to his world. Zyra placed her head on his shoulder and whispered back, "Thank you for catching me, thank you for believing. Thank you for not running." The child stood and raised his hand, and the stars seemed to flicker in answer. Not magic, not power, just connection. In that moment, all things were quiet, all things were still, all things were one.